Back on ABC24 this week with Susan Adler-Thorpe and Otis Sanford, and we're talking about the goings-on in Nashville now, and there were plenty of goings-on. They never disappoint, do they, Otis?
They really never do.
So let's just go, let's start with the first one. The Representative Paul Sherrill, he represents the thriving metropolis of Sparta, Tennessee. He gets on the House floor as we're talking about different ways we can execute people as a form of the death penalty. Here's what he had to say.
I was just wondering about, could I put an amendment on that? It would include hanging by a tree also.
Heard him say it. Can we also add hanging by a tree? There were calls for a firing squad.
Yeah.
There was calls to bring back Sparky, which I guess was the nickname for an electric chair that Tennessee had years ago.
Yeah.
And he gets out there and says, how about hanging a rope from a tree and taking care of people that way? It's just disgusting. And he has since pseudo-apologized if he offended anyone, which he did.
Everyone.
Should have offended everyone. But what does it say that a lawmaker thinks he can get away with that? Susan, I'll start with you.
Susan, start with you.
You know, I don't have an answer for that. I mean, how do you plumb the depth of a mind that is so shallow and so stunted? You can't even understand that. You know, I think that this Representative Sherrill is a good example of the riffraff that people are electing to office. I mean, who wants that man to make a decision for the public good ever? I can't give you an answer why he would say something like that. If he wants people to be hung from a tree, maybe he should show us how it's done.
Well, you wouldn't say something like that, even if that's what you thought, if you thought you were going to be held accountable for it.
True.
So he's not worried. He's not worried about his voters ousting him for making a hateful remark like that?
Absolutely not. I mean, you know, he's from Sparta, Tennessee. That is deep in the bluegrass country of Tennessee. I looked up the demographics of Sparta, and it's 87% white, about 4% African American, and then there are others. Now, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that the rest of that 87% believes exactly how Mr. Sherrill believes. But you were right, Richard. There's no political retribution for this. But this man will be 64 years old at the end of this month. 64. That's old enough to understand and know the horrors of lynchings and hanging by a tree that a lot of African Americans endured over a century or more, including here in Tennessee, most of the time for being, they were innocent people. And for him to suggest that particular hanging by a tree as a form of capital punishment is disgusting, reprehensible, and it makes him, it disqualifies him from being a legislator.
The percentages of the demographics that you just cited in Sparta tells you that this man is completely insensitive to the demographics of the rest of the state,
yeah,
that he is a representative for. I think it's, you know, I used to write years ago that there's a disconnect between politicians and people. Politicians are people who worry about the next election. Statesmen worry about the next generation. This man is a politician.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
and a bad one at that.
Bad one.
So some legislation that did pass this week and governor has since signed. Number one is the anti-drag show bill. Once again, not Memphis on the national front page now, but the state certainly is, because we're the first in the country to do this. Apparently there are a dozen or so other states who are considering the same thing, but Governor Bill Lee couldn't wait, apparently. I mean, literally within minutes, if not hours, of it being passed by the legislature, he signed it. He also signed a bill against gender-confirming procedures for minors, affecting anyone under the age of 18. And one thing I find interesting about the anti-drag show bill also affects minors. They cannot be, no drag shows can take place in public places where a minor might see them. Okay, but was this a huge problem? These bills that passed, I wasn't aware that that was even an issue or a problem, but apparently it's front and center. We want to get national headlines for it, and I don't understand the...
I didn't know it was a huge problem either, Richard. But I think I do know the reason why Governor Lee signed it so quickly. He wanted to get past it. And he didn't want any more discussion about the fact that he was dressed in drag in high school. There's a picture of it in the high school yearbook that has now been plastered all over the place.
Yes.
I heard it was on a billboard or was going to be on a billboard in Nashville. He signed it so quickly because he wants the story to end and get past what's going on.
Well, I think that we ought to put Sesame Street on notice, because I think Miss Piggy is dressed in drag, and we're going to have a real problem in Tennessee with Miss Piggy. Bill Lee is just, again, being a politician, pandering to his base. He doesn't have to worry about the next election, but he does need to worry about the legislature and passing legislation.
But I think the whole legislature, the Republican supermajority, is pandering to its base.
Oh, without question.
With everything that they do, pretty much.
Yep.
The gender-affirming bill, the drag bill, the anti-abortion, they're not willing to change that trigger law at all. There's just a lot of things that they are pandering to their base on, and they'll keep doing.
Well, but you have to keep in mind, too, that Republicans complain that they only want smaller government, that government is too big, we should have smaller government. But they don't mind enlarging government by going into your bedroom, worrying about what your gender is, on and on and on. It's just, it is the era that we're living in, the political era, and we can't get through it fast enough.
No.
Well, it's simple politics. You know, I don't know how serious they really are deep down about this legislation, but they are experts at finding the divisive issues, these trigger issues, whether there are a serious problem or not. Like I say about minors attending drag shows, I'm just not aware of that being a problem. But they love the attention it gets. They know we in the media are happy to do many stories about it, and we kind of take care of the publicity for them.
Oh yeah.
And you know, they seek to divide and conquer.
We're
and
going to
that's kind
find
of
out
what's
how
going on.
serious they all are when some of the drag queens, particularly around Memphis and Nashville, perform.
Right.
And we see what happens.
Well, and we also know that each local prosecutor, it's stated in the legislation, decides whether to enforce those bills. I have a feeling D.A. Mulroy's got better things to do. It's interesting. The places where there are drag shows, those prosecutors probably aren't going to enforce that law.
No.
So again, why?
Which tells
Why?
you they're pandering to their base.
Absolutely. And the more we criticize it, we meaning opinion journalists like me, the happier these lawmakers are. Because if I'm criticizing it, they can go and tell their constituents, I must be doing something right.
Yep. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to move to Arkansas next, head across the river about some legislation over there in a moment.